protester was slammed to the ground by a police officer. His head smashed to the ground. He was knocked out, and the police officer was subsequently suspended from work and charged with assault. But recently, and this has just happened, a Melbourne magistrate, Rob Starry, has said, no, it's not assault, and the sergeant in question has been exonerated of his charges. Now, I've got the video here to remind you of what took place, but before I play it, please be advised that the footage is traumatic, okay? So viewer discretion is advised. It's very violent, and if you don't want to see that sort of stuff, then turn the video off now.
Surprise, he's back. Oh!
Alright, so that's the victim right there, ladies and gentlemen. His name's Daniel Peterson English. So first of all, Daniel, if you're listening, my heart goes out to you. And I think I speak on behalf of so many people when I say that so many of us, we don't want to see our fellow Victorians getting assaulted by anyone. And just because somebody happens to wear a blue uniform, it does not give them the right to assault members of the public, even if by doing so, they are propelling the objectives of the state. So yeah, Daniel, my heart goes out to you. Just a horrible miscarriage of justice. I hope that you're okay. And this is just typical of the state of play here in Victoria. Alrighty, so let's take a bit of a look at what's going on here, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first of all, the first question I'd like to ask you is, do you think the footage was assault? Do you think that was an assault that was carried out? Well, to understand that, look no further than the Victorian Crimes Act of 1958. So, assault here is defined by the direct or indirect application of force by a person to the body of or to the clothing or equipment worn by another person, where the application of force is A, without lawful excuse, and B, with intent to inflict or being reckless as to the infliction of bodily injury, pain, discomfort, damage, insult, or deprivation of liberty, and results in the infliction of any such consequence, whether or not the consequence inflicted is the consequence intended or foreseen. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Nowhere in the Crimes Act, in the definition, does it state that, well, none of this applies if you happen to be wearing a blue uniform. It doesn't state that. Assault is assault is assault. It doesn't matter who you are or what your reason for doing it is. Assault is illegal, and people who commit assault are criminals and should be punished. But that hasn't happened, ladies and gentlemen. So, why hasn't it happened? Well, let me read to you here. Magistrate Rob Starry today dismissed those charges, noting crowds around the station had been escalating. All right, he said, quote, "There is a long period in which his behavior had escalated." Okay, which is, by the way, that's no excuse for somebody assaulting somebody else. Goes on to say, quote, "Mr. Peterson English's behavior can only be described as threatening and abusive, in which he taunted police continuously." Well, that's very subjective for a magistrate, wouldn't you say, ladies and gentlemen? Described as threatening and abusive. According to who? According to the police officer who had 50 of his colleagues all around him with riot gear. According to this Melbourne magistrate, goes on to say, after reviewing the evidence throughout the hearing, Magistrate Starry found that while the arrest was not by the book, not by the book, that's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it was what we just witnessed was a brutal, sadistic assault on an innocent man. He said that it couldn't be proved that acting Sergeant Barratt's actions involved criminal intent, and a jury could not find him guilty. Very, very bold words there by the Melbourne magistrate, wouldn't you say, ladies and gentlemen? So let's see. That's him right there. So that's the magistrate Rob Starry. In some circles, he's actually referred to as the, quote, terrorist lawyer. That's right, because he has a background in defense, and he has, in fact, defended a very, very serious convicted terrorist in the past. And, well, I dare say that the actions of the Sergeant Barratt is reminiscent of terrorism. And I know that's a bold thing to say, but In order for me to make this assertion, one simply needs to just understand the basics of how terrorism is defined, which is generally an act of violence that is motivated by some type of political or ideological objective. And I dare say the events that transpired in Victoria over the past 3 years were indeed motivated by politics and ideology, and those politics and ideology were brutally enforced by the Victoria Police. So I guess some things don't change for certain individuals, and in the case of this bloke right here, Rob, honestly, can you honestly face the Victorian public and say that when you made this decision that you were acting without bias? Can you honestly, in the depths of your soul, say that you made a decision based on fairness? Can you? A Melbourne man was smashed to the ground by another man, right, who happened to be wearing a blue uniform, concussed. The victim might still have head trauma. And all this magistrate can say is that it can't be proved that there was criminal intent. It looks pretty damn obvious to me, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the police minister, by the way, Anthony Carbine. Don't count on him making any type of statement. He's just there to say yes, boss, to Daniel Andrews. And this is right here is the police officer who, what's his name? Beau Barratt. That's right. This bloke right here, he can't believe he got so lucky. That's right. He can't believe he got so lucky. He thought he was done. He thought that he was going to be out of the job, never ever to return. But actually, it's his lucky day. I dare say that Beau was able to receive, by some sort of good fortune, a very sympathetic magistrate. And it's very frightening to think that this particular individual here, Beau, who has the rank of sergeant, was able to carry out this extreme act of assault and will ultimately be able to put his uniform back on and potentially go and hurt somebody else. It boggles the mind, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? And it sets such a dangerous precedent. So what can we take from this magistrate's decision, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I think about it and I think, well, does this mean that members of the police can act in excessively violent manners if it is for the objective of furthering the agenda of the state? All right? Because I can guarantee you, if you or I did to somebody in the street what Sergeant Beau Barratt did to that innocent Victorian, you or I would definitely be charged and convicted and would probably go to jail. The only difference is that you and I were not wearing a blue uniform and we were not enforcing the nonsensical policies of a corrupt government. So I guess my conclusion from this, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously I'm very heartbroken for the victim in this situation. Very, very heartbroken. We don't like to see that happen to anyone, and that, of course, is Mr. Peterson English. I consider there's been a tremendous miscarriage of justice. People who assault other people should feel the full force of the law, and what this really brings to light is that here in Victoria, the rule of law does not apply equally to everyone. There's certain rules for some people who happen to belong to a certain class, and other rules for other people. Now, this is so highly hypocritical of the Victorian government. So we've got the government obviously here in Victoria, and the judiciary is part of the government. And the ethos in Victoria is definitely equality, right? Everywhere you go in relation to government, it's all about equality and fairness and equal opportunities for all. But what it most definitely has been proven here is that life isn't equal for all in Victoria, ladies and gentlemen, and the government will most definitely grant privileges and powers to those in its ranks and strip those privileges from other people. And if a certain member of the public happens to be in a class, or say in a category the government considers to be disruptive or a nuisance or at odds with the objectives of the state, well, that person will simply be treated differently. And that is, of course, because in the state of Victoria, right, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Thank you for watching. To make sure you never miss an episode, sign up at mcjreport.com. Catch you on the next one.